against host Qatar. Qatar, the first host to lose their opening game of the World Cup in history. We had the Netherlands beating Senegal thanks to a couple of late goals. England hammering Iran 6-2, where it was just craziness all over that game. And then the US drawing with Wales in a really tight, tense, scrappy game of two halves. That was your game of two halves, wasn't it? Absolutely. But what has been your main takeaway from this tournament so far?
Again, asking me to think about anything other than the United States men's national team is hard, but knowing how much we're going to talk about that, I'll tell you that everything else kind of went as I expected. Senegal without Sadio Mane, I mentioned this to you guys in the group chat. It made me realize in the first 45 minutes of that game that they really could have challenged to do something special if they still had Mane. And so he's probably the first real injury absence that we're really looking at over all these teams to really affect a result of these first four results.
Andy, what about you? What was your big takeaway from these games so far in Qatar?
Yeah, I'll echo the point of Nick right there very quickly. Defensively, incredibly solid with really good experience in the back. They've got a midfield that's as strong as any team in this tournament, and they've got a couple of, I think, good secondary attackers. Ismaila Sarr, somebody we know very well from the Premier League, being one of them, but they don't have that superstar that ties it all together, the constant threat, the player that the opposing team has to game plan for, and that creates the time and space for others. That just wasn't there for them, and it is frustrating because they could have, obviously won Africa Cup of Nations earlier this year, could have gone on and had a fantastic run at the World Cup. This is probably the final opportunity for the likes of Koulibaly and Mane, players that have been around for as long as they haven't done what they've done for the national team. I think, though, the biggest story, because it's the most consequential in terms of the World Cup and what's going to happen at the latter stages, is what England did against Iran. I know you can say, well, it's just Iran. It's just Iran. They're very defensive. You get an early goal, and it can really open up, and it can snowball from there. And that's kind of what happened. But to see England come out game number one with such control and such confidence and dominate a game the way that they did, I thought was – and it wasn't surprising. I thought they would win, but the way that they just looked so comfortable and so easy and free-flowing, it didn't really look like England, did it, Joe?
No, it surprised me. You said you weren't surprised, but as an Englishman, my default mode is disappointment when it comes to World Cups and major tournaments. So, yeah, it was very refreshing. I think Gareth Southgate, something happened in that game against Germany in the Nations League just before the World Cup break where they went for it in the second half. More cavalier, more attacking players, more players who are comfortable on the ball further forward. And they replicated that against Iran from start to finish of that game. They were just dominant and could have scored even more than 6, really. And to be able to bring on Rashford, Callum Wilson, Foden, Jack Grealish, and still have the likes of Jordan Henderson, Alexander-Arnold, Calvin Phillips not even playing. I mean, the depth of the squad is incredible. And Bukayo Saka was excellent. Harry Kane's role in some of the goals was superb. He's allowed to drop back a bit deeper. And Jude Bellingham, I mean, what a talent he is, 19 years of age, scoring his first World Cup goal in his first World Cup appearance, getting England off and running. And he just seems to really knit this midfield and entire England team together. So I'm not getting too carried away, lads. Obviously, we know the big one is up next. But my general thoughts and big takeaway is similar to you, Andy. I didn't expect it to be that easy for England. And that is quite refreshing for me. I really will say that. Nick, what about you? I mean, is there any other main takeaways? I mean, Qatar struggled. They looked like they froze really against Ecuador. But Ecuador, a very good, solid defensive team. Enner Valencia took those chances in the first half. And they could cause, if it is the US and England to get out of Group B, then they could cause them some problems, right? The way they set up and just really resolute defensively. So really good win for Ecuador to kick things off.
Yeah, a good win. I kind of rebel against some of the narrative that goes around. I think there are so many questions for the last 10 years with this tournament being in Qatar have led us to ignore the fact that their national team isn't very good. And yes, I know they did well at the Gold Cup against CONCACAF competition, but we shouldn't be surprised that they lost to Ecuador and were bossed. I expected them to be a little bit better put together because of how long they've been playing together and who they've been playing against. But it hasn't been any of us, don't worry. But I'm the sort of belly aching over history. I was like, oh, come on. Did you expect them to pick up a bunch of wins unless there was something kind of creepy going on? And I didn't. And so everyone who has won, I think, has been explainable so far, except the team that drew today that I'm very sad about.
We will get onto that, Nick. I promise you, mate. It'll be cathartic and just it will be a healing experience for you. I'm pretty sure about that for all of us. For all of us. Andy, the World Cup generally, there's been a theme through the opening few games. There is a lot of stoppage time being added to pretty much every game. I'm trying to work out why. There's been a few injuries, a lot of stoppages, a lot of substitutions, but a lot more than usual, right? It seems that whatever they usually add to a Premier League game or Champions League game, they're basically doubling that. I mean, in the England game, there was 24 minutes of stoppage time over both halves. So is that a concern, I guess, early in the tournament that it's so stop-start, or is this just to be expected with a World Cup in the middle of the season?
Yeah, probably to be expected. And I have noticed that. I think a lot of people have noticed that. And I do think it is maybe not taken away from the games just a little bit, but I think it's definitely slowed some games down in ways that you don't necessarily want to see at this level in a tournament like this. Obviously, the injury early in the England-Iran game was, a bit of an interesting situation, how that entire thing played out over, 10 to 12 minutes or so. And so obviously you've got a massive, 14 minutes in the first half there. I don't know that I've seen that one for a long time. But yeah, I would imagine this is probably going to be a theme throughout the tournament. Players are tired, so any opportunity they can take to steal a few breaths or a swig of water, I think they're going to take it at every single. And I think the refs, honestly, if you really put it all into perspective of humans and these players are people as well, it's probably the right thing to do given the load that all of these guys are under right now with the season that's either already been completed or currently in progress, depending on where they play their club ball.
And also keeps us watching for longer, and it's just on our TVs for longer. It's great. Keeps us busy all the time.